Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Front Porch with United Capital Management. And this evening, our guest is Brian DeMint, the author of this book. Lights kind of poorly here, but it's called The Bitcoin Evangelist. Okay, so Brian, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chad. I'm happy to be on with you.
I need to put on a bunch of disclaimers. This evening, we can dive really deep. We're not talking to a CEO of a publicly traded company that has to be careful what he says, and so this is going to be more fun. We're talking to an author of a great book, and how I learned of this book and bought it and read it and have listened to it maybe 1.5 times on my app. I started Googling Bitcoin in the Bible just to see if any evangelists or any Christian authors had picked up and written anything, and I come across his book, and so that's why I reached out to Brian, and of course why I read the book. And Brian, one of the things that when you emailed me, you wanted to talk about Christian apologetics. Let's just dive right into that and give us your take on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the way that I came to a stance in Bitcoin was very, very similar to the way that I came to my faith. I was a skeptic when it came to God and the veracity of the Bible, and I think that's everybody's journey is different. But for me coming to Bitcoin, it sounds weird saying I came to Bitcoin. It sounds too religious. But the way that I approached Bitcoin was in that skeptical sense. I knew a few guys that kind of dabbled in it. They were dabbling in it purely for investment sake, and that's fine. Everybody can be in it for their own reasons, but they didn't understand the fundamental tenets of Bitcoin, and that was what I wanted to know about. Well, if this is going to go up in value, give me the reason for it. Why is this sound money? And so I needed to, or I came at it from a skeptical kind of non-believer standpoint. But yeah, going back 15 years before that, that's how I was 14 years old when I was saved, and I was a junior high, young high school atheist. That was kind of popular culture to be skeptical, either agnostic or atheist. I found that that it seemed a little bit more authentic to make a decision, right? The agnostic says, I don't know if there's a God. I thought I was so arrogant to believe that there absolutely is no God. But the arguments are quite simple in terms of Christian apologetics, and people find some that are more compelling arguments than others. But it's something that you kind of referenced when we were talking off air about before, is how sophisticated the human body is. Technology 20 years ago, or 25 years ago when I was becoming a Christian, was a lot less sophisticated even than it is now. AI and all those things were far less advanced. But I remember that one of the really compelling arguments for the argument for why there's a creator, not Jesus Christ yet. You have to get to why there's a creator first, and then of the gods, which God is true. But the really compelling argument for there being a God was that the most sophisticated computers in the world, and now fast forward to today, even the most sophisticated computers in AI, which have billions of dollars of research and development, and the most brilliant minds in the world, the most brilliant intelligent minds in the world, haven't created an artificial mind as sophisticated as the human mind. And the human mind is only one element of what makes us a human being. Our immune system is this brilliantly complex thing. The human eyeball is this brilliantly complex system. The auditory system, the way that we smell, the way that we touch and feel, the way that we reproduce, all these systems are incredibly complicated, and the most brilliant minds haven't found ways to replicate any one of those systems, let alone put all those systems together into a cohesive, sensible, rational organism that's capable of love and feeling and all these different things. So that was a really compelling argument, is that what we are is so far more complicated than anything that humans could develop at that time, and fast forward to today, even more complicated than what we can develop today. And one of the arguments that kind of stamped that for me in addition was I believe it was Frank Turek. Frank Turek's this great apologist, and he said, if you were walking on the beach and you saw written in the sand, I love you, the words, I love you with all of my heart, love Tom, you would never tell your friend if you're walking on the beach with them, hey, I bet the waves created those letters right there. And that perfect order, that order that makes sense, that's rational, it communicates a message, it communicates a feeling, it communicates something sensible. In a million years, you would never make the argument that the waves, by accident, by chance, no matter how much time you gave it, that the waves created those letters in that perfect order. And now the perfect order of I love you with all my heart, love Tom, is a very unsophisticated message that's far less complicated than the information in the human genome, for example. The human genome, something in the order of complexity to 1,000 encyclopedias. So if one phrase cannot happen by accident, then certainly 1,000 encyclopedias worth of information it cannot be accounted for by chance and time. It just cannot happen that way. So those arguments like that were very compelling for me in terms of coming to the understanding that there is a creator. Now I'd be happy to go into the apologetics that led me into the veracity of the Bible, but it's things like that I think are good, because nowadays the fact that I didn't just jump into my faith, I didn't just get into it without thinking about it. Now I'm able to use that as a tool in my evangelism belt going forward, because as we talked off air, there's still a lot of atheists in the world. There's still a lot of agnostics. And so being able to give a sensible, rational reason for the faith that we believe, I think it's a good thing.
Well, maybe you can tell me the verse, coming to Christ with childlike faith and believing, and you came at it at age 14. You must have had a lot higher IQ than I did at that time. Any healthcare in your background, parents or anything like that?
In terms of healthcare?
Yeah, because it almost, when you from a science and medical perspective, you think that's a natural route to. What you just said is just unbelievable, and I've never heard that analogy, and I will use that. But yeah, creating a human, didn't just happen with an explosion, and nor did it happen over time with apes, and so. If you want to go in the second part of that, go ahead. We can save the Bitcoin to later.
Yeah, no, I think that most of the arguments from atheists that I read were talking about these biological systems. So it's not that I have parents that were in healthcare or doctors or, we'd studied science in school, and I felt that my biology teachers who were teaching us about biology, I'm like, you're really describing a really complicated system here. And then your reason for how that system developed, it's kind of a dumb answer. Like, I was really frustrated that this is what I'm being taught in school, and this is what I'm trying. At the time, I was trying to believe that. I wanted a good answer. I wanted to be an atheist because it left me moral autonomy. At 14, you want to do whatever you want to do, and so if there's no God, I get to do what I want to do. And so I was looking for a good, rational reason to be an atheist, and I felt that the best answers out there for atheism, they left you wanting more. And so I think most people just say, they're satisfied with moral autonomy. Well, I don't need a good answer. I just want to be able to do whatever I want. So most people stop at that point, but I would genuinely wanted to know the answer.
Out of curiosity, where did you go to high school, and what age are you now?
I am 37 now, 14 at the time. And then I went to public school. I went to Riverside Poly High School, the Bears.
California. So the one of the things that to kind of compliment a little bit about what you said, I shared with you when I reached out to you. I'm surprised that Christianity churches haven't grabbed on to what I like to refer to as Web 3 and decentralized and get on all of that, but just Bitcoin, capitalism, freedom. I joked with you that when I've had evangelical Christians look at me and say, I think Bitcoin's from the devil, and I say, well, then that'll just put it with the even with the dollar bill. Let's just see how this plays out. But there's a lot of freedom in it, and I look at it as pure capitalism, ultimate wealth distribution. We've talked about all those things, but you want to let's talk about that. You talk about the social layers and parallel the Bitcoin economy to that, and the Orange Pill app. Why don't you go into that here for a while?
Yeah, well, to your point about the why Christians haven't taken it up, I'm right there with you. I think that that's a big reason why I wrote the book. Even in the dedication to the book, I dedicate the book to the church, then to my mom, then to my wife. There's a 3-part dedication, but the church is, I actually put it there, and with the blessing of my mother and my wife, the church was the first dedication, because I want Christians to adopt this. I think that if you read through Proverbs, where it talks an awful lot about economic systems and what God detests and what God blesses, God does not like unfair economic systems. The Proverbs talk a lot about unbalanced weights and unfair economic systems and people that take advantage of other people. The Proverbs talk multiple times throughout the 31 chapters of Proverbs. And so Christians should adopt Bitcoin because it actually is a better form of money. It's a more moral system. And so let me give you an example here. I have 4 kids. I have 3 biological girls and we have 1 adopted son. He's the oldest, and so he's 10, and my youngest, she's 5. They tend to be the most in conflict. They were all sitting around playing a game of Monopoly. We have children's Monopoly at our house. And I love Monopoly. It's a great game, but I was just sitting there watching them, or I wasn't watching them the whole time. I'm walking in the room, kind of watching them for a few minutes. And my boy had been sticking the dollar bills, the cash, under the table and hiding his money. My 5-year-old, she rage quit the game. She was so frustrated by him because he kept hiding his money, and she felt that that was cheating. And so they had this big argument where she threw over a bunch of the houses and she walked away. And I said, why did you walk away? Why did you yell at him? Why did you get mad? She goes, because he's cheating. He's hiding his money. That's not fair. And so sure enough, we looked up the rules. And in Monopoly, you're not allowed to hide your money. You have to place your money on the board. That's part of the rules of the game. And so the reason why I use that analogy is because even a 5-year-old understands that a game that does not have clearly defined rules is not worth playing. It's immoral, it's not fun, it's not good to play a game to which we don't know all of the rules. And so when I talk to friends or Christians in the church and the same question comes up inevitably, and that's good. I ask the same question. You ask the same question. We all should ask that question. That is a good question. We should be skeptical at first of Bitcoin. But when they say, oh, the dollar and it's is the Bitcoin the devil? I'd say, tell me how many dollars are in existence right now. And they say, I don't know. And even if they're a smart financial advisor, they might talk about the M2 money supply or some kind of quantifiable thing that the Feds put out. But at the end of the day, we don't really know how many dollars are in existence. We just don't. We don't know how much the U.S. is going to borrow next month. They say how much they're going to borrow, which is like crazily more than what we spend on national defense. That's how much they're going to borrow over the next 3 months. There's all sorts of crazy things out there. But we do not know. The U.S. government is essentially hiding their money under the board. My 5-year-old knows not to play that game. But with Bitcoin, the rules are clearly written. Anybody can write the rules. And we all know that there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin ever in existence. Everybody knows the rules. Everybody gets to play the game by the same rules. So the Michael Saylors of the world, the guys that hold hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin, or the little guy in a remote village in Africa who has a few 100,000 sats to his name, which for those that don't know, sats are just pieces of Bitcoin. They both, yes, one is going to have more and one is going to have less, but they both play by the same rules. Nobody ever said that this is going to be socialism and everybody's going to have the exact same amount of Bitcoin. But what they are promised is that everybody plays by the same rules. And that system has just never existed in the history of humanity. And so as a Christian, I think we should push for fair and just systems, not in this captured, socialistic, communistic, political sense, because all systems, if you're a Christian, you believe that humans are fallible. So we shouldn't put more people that are fallible in charge of these systems and trust them. What the Bible tells us is that people are going to mess up. So the best thing you can do is make the rules based on mathematics itself. Do you need to trust in that 2 + 2 = 4? No, you don't need to trust in that. That's just an axiom. We know that that's going to happen. And that's the kind of certainty we have with the rules of Bitcoin. the rules, if you try to send money from person A to person B, there's no middleman to censor that transaction, to block you, to say that, you know what, you don't believe the right things, you don't say the politically correct things, you don't give to the right political organizations, you don't eat the food you're supposed to eat. There's nobody in the middle of that to block or to be an arbiter of those rules. We all play by the same rules. My 5-year-old wants to play that game, and I think every Christian should want to play that game for humanity's benefit.
I could make 75 comments from what all of you just said and 75 questions, but let's try this one. See how far you can go on this. Let's talk about the rules of the game today. Okay, let's talk about this game we're playing.
Beautiful.
Okay, has a fiat currency ever existed and lasted for as long as the dollar? I believe the answer is no, but I haven't studied economic history back centuries. But I think it's probably the longest going. But let's talk about this. All our clients know what a balance sheet is. They all had to fill one out and have one. And let's talk about the term off-balance sheet debt. I've never been able to walk into a bank and say, hey, here's my balance sheet. Oh, by the way, here's the off-balance sheet debt that I don't have to tell you about. And I don't know. I think it was in the... We left this wide open. This is not financial advice, and we don't have any recommendations here, and we're not going to fact check everything like we're under a deposition here. But I think it was in The Economist back in, as far back as 2010 or 11, the off-balance sheet debt of the U.S. government in excess of X number of trillion, but projected over the next 10 years to be over $300 trillion. And
yeah, the unfunded liabilities are absolutely insane.
That's what the whole thing was about, and just doing the math on the future of what this economy is sucking. And when you when you try to Google and find out private versus public sector, you can actually read that as many as 87% of people are employed in the private sector, and that's baloney, because I can find other things that say more 60-40. But when you take all of the adults living in this country and you take those that are just of working age and that are employed, in a book I read recently, the guy projected that the government has to print $100 trillion to get 50 trillion of output. Okay, and you start. I'm going to let you talk about fractional reserve banking in a minute, and I'll come up with a question in here. But you take the PPP, what happened after COVID. You take a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, $800 billion semiconductor bill, the money that's being printed in this Israel war, and you can't even quantify how much they're printing to keep this economy afloat. My main point in there was if you take the government printing out of this economy, what does it look like? I'm going to say, it would be wrong to say that 100% of the American public is dependent on a government check, but 100% of the public financially is, well, it feels like they're benefiting from the printing of the money,
Yeah. Certainly the economy is it's kind of on this, I don't know if you want to call it life support, but I don't think people understand that part of the circulatory system of our economy right now is based on this central planning. I mean, we think because we're America that we're a capitalist economy. We're not. Like, the unfortunate consequence is that if you have a central bank in your country, you're not a free market. You're not a market economy. You're not a capitalist economy. We can call it that, but it's a centrally planned economy. I have you can actually see the logo of my business right here. I have a chain of brick and mortar locations called Salt and Light. We do wellness services. Okay. Some of our worst months ever, we were actually performing the best in our business, but some of the worst months ever was when the Fed started cutting interest rates. My business has nothing to do with interest rates. It doesn't. We don't have that. We don't do loans or debt servicing or anything like that. We sell wellness services. Why is a company that's providing excellent, high quality wellness services, we had just invested in new equipment, so we had better equipment than we ever had. why was our business actually decreasing because of the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates? That indicates that there's one entity, which, by the way, you give me free reign. It's a private entity. If I said Facebook gets to decide what the interest rates are for everybody, everybody would write to their congressman tomorrow. They'd be at their congressman's office and say, we need to change this. Henry Ford has this great quote. It's on the back of my book. He says, if people understood our monetary and banking system, which we'll get into fractional reserve banking, if people understood this system, there would be revolution before tomorrow. If everybody fully grasped that, things would change. And so it's, when you call something the Federal Reserve, it sounds like it's this government sanctioned thing that's awesome, and that's because we were all born into a Federal Reserve system. We think that that's just the way it is. We do not have free market capitalism in our country. And so we're not seeing the economic benefits of that. We're seeing a centrally planned economy at the behest of the Federal Reserve. And yeah, when you get into the rules, like we were talking about, the rules are pretty funky. When you deposit $1,000 into the bank, you have FDIC insurance. Yeah, that's great, but they're loaning out up to 100% of your deposit. So that's great. You could go into the bank tomorrow and probably get that deposit back. Don't try to ask for more than $10,000, because then they're gonna give you the sniff test. They're gonna ask you to pee into a cup, and they're gonna ask for some hair follicles to make sure that you're who you say you are, even though it's your money. But if everybody decided to go get their money tomorrow, you physically could not get your money, because if everybody's having 90% of their funds lent out, then there just simply isn't money there for everybody to go get their money. Now, thankfully, there's not a bank run every day, and with technology, banks have these circuit breakers that they can flip to make sure that people don't withdraw their money very quickly. So there's technological advancements that will prevent this. Now, it's not to your advantage or my advantage that those technological circuit breakers exist, because it's ways to limit our access to our own funds. But in terms of like catastrophic failure of the system, it would prevent that to some degree. But fractional reserve banking is a scary reality that when your money is in the bank, you do not own your money. It is not yours. You are lending it. You are a lender. You are a creditor in that regard. And most people don't realize that that's the relationship that they have with their bank.
I got a deep question, but I remember back in 2008, what was the number? I think when the banking crisis happened, credit default swaps, that entire mess, the world melts down, falls apart, Fed comes to the rescue with 800 billion, and then eventually I think about 4 trillion, okay? Something along those lines. And the balance sheet of the FDIC, I believe, was $50 billion. You know, I didn't know we were going to talk about this today, so I would have re-looked all that up. And you know, imagine if that was printed on the front of the Wall Street Journal, X amounts needed, and you know, the FDIC didn't have a fraction of what was needed to do a bailout. So obviously the Fed bailed the system out, I guess you could say. But diving in really deep here, so in your opinion, did it all go wrong in 1913, and we know how it was created, but did it help create a higher standard of living, better economies? Part of me wants to argue from 1930 to the First World War, that was the greatest temptation to turn on those printing presses. And then a lot of people will argue that Wall Street bought Washington in 1980. Could argue it ran pretty well from there. Have you ever studied so deep to go back to prior to 1913, and what would the world look like if we would have never had the Federal Reserve System? That's good.
Yeah, I think
I don't expect an answer, but if you got one, I'm impressed.
Oh no, that's fine. I think people, they give a lot of credit to the system we have now as being, wow, look at how much innovation's happened since 1913. what's happened since 1913 in terms of economic productivity, technological advancements, all those things, they should not be credited to a central bank. I think that if you had removed the central bank since then, we would actually have much more flourishing. If we had less bureaucracy, we would have much more flourishing. Everything that's happened in the last 100 years was built on the shoulders of the giants of the Industrial Revolution. We had a market system, a market economy for largely most of the 19th century. The 1800s was where most technological advancement came from and set us up to really boom technologically in the 1900s. Innovation that we have innovation never comes from demand side economics. It comes from supply side economics. And so we had a supply side economy in the 17 and 1800s. We had a demand side economy in the 1900s, but it was the supply side economics that really pushed us forward. Let me explain what I mean by that. So demand side economics. Now, I actually tweeted this example out a few weeks ago. So if anybody follows me on Twitter, you'll have seen this. Imagine we're back in 1900. And the government of New York City, the government of the United States, for example, is saying, you know what, we have a transportation problem. We have more people than we've ever had, and so we need to help stimulate travel so that people can work. They can get to their factory jobs. They can get to where they need to go. The government solution in a demand side economy, because all the government can do, if they print money, then they can hurry up and spend it with companies and create demand. This is Keynesian economics. They think that they can prop up the government by spending. Their only solution is to use the existing technology and buy more of it. So what would a demand side economist do if there was a transportation problem? They would say, we need to print millions or billions of dollars and buy more horse and buggy. We need to buy all the horse and buggy that we can possibly buy. We need to create demand for what already exists. In a supply side economy, innovators, people that aren't strapped down by bureaucracy and that are able to flourish through innovation, they create entirely new solutions to problems. So instead of ordering or buying a lot more horse and buggy, you create the automobile, and you create something that moves people further, faster, and more efficiently than they ever could before. And that isn't the product of government stimulus. That isn't the product of demand. You create supply first. You create the supply of something better and more useful. Surely there was the supply of lots of other innovations for transportation that didn't work out. There was bicycles that supposedly could move you faster and things like that. Those ideas didn't win out. The automobile won out because it was very efficient, it was very fast, it was very scalable to build it in factories. And so our transportation problems were solved by innovation in technology and creating the supply of something entirely new, as opposed to what the government solution would have been, is just to buy more of what already exists. And so we're better off as a civilization, as humanity, because of the advent of the automobile. And you can use that for any type of innovation that's happened since. We see massive inflation in every sector where there's a three-letter agency that regulates it. Now, think about everything that's more expensive right now, but now look at things like the television. Your big screen television, the 70-inch beautiful 4K display that you have in your living room that costs $700 or something ridiculously cheap for this beautiful TV. There's not a three-letter agency that regulates TVs. So innovation, technology is naturally, when left to its own devices, is actually deflationary. TVs, because they're not highly regulated, that same TV, first of all, it didn't exist 20 years ago. 70-inch 4K didn't exist. A worse version, a plasma screen TV that consumed a lot more electricity, it didn't have as clear of a picture. That same TV 15, 20 years ago would have cost you $15,000, $10,000 for that TV. Now, a better version of it costs you $700 from Walmart. That's what technology does. And so when left to their own devices, when central banks and three-letter agencies are not regulating, then we actually see deflation in technology, or we see deflation in prices. But look at any of the industries that have a three-letter agency behind them. Those things are more expensive and less accessible because of bureaucratic regulation.
Again, this conversation can go 75 different directions, but now you're bringing up a whole new amount of money being loaned. SBA banks loaning with the assumption that the income will be there, or the appreciation of the underlying asset. And technology overall is very deflationary. Okay, do you trying to bring this back together? Man, where do I take it from here?
Sorry, I hit tangents along the way,
It's
so
all right.
I give you too much.
I just absolutely find this fascinating. If I was to, obviously I'll send this podcast before we broadcast it out through social media. I might send it to my mom first and say, okay, where did we lose you? Okay, but overall here, we've got a major problem in overall commerce here. Okay, a society that's very dependent on the Fed printing more money. Okay, but where we could go from here is there is capitalism at work, and technology is going to probably solve this. With possibly the world's first ever largest barter system, digital barter. So let's move into that. Did you actually know Hal Finney, or did you come to know Bitcoin a little bit later than that? So
I wish I could say that I knew Hal Finney.
yeah,
I did not know Hal Finney, who was one of the originators of Bitcoin. He didn't create it. We don't, not that we know of, but he was a very early adopter.
just for fun, do you have an opinion then on who created it, how it got created?
On who Satoshi is.
Yeah, that you'd like to share, or would you rather not?
I like to think I share in my book briefly. I say that it's one of those things we're not supposed to
Did
talk
I miss
about
that in
in
your book?
Bitcoin. Yeah, there's a small section,
Okay.
and we're not supposed to talk about it because if you were to accidentally guess who is Satoshi, then you don't want to. The whole point is that Satoshi's
Oh yeah.
anonymous, and so but I like to guess that it's this guy named Adam Back. He actually is the CEO of a company called Blockstream.
Okay.
They have all sorts of Bitcoin solutions. They're kind of continuing to add to the Bitcoin technology stack. One of the questions that people get a lot is like, well, if there was an EMP explosion and all the electrical devices were burned out, and there was didn't have the internet and that sort of thing. For me, I do keep some of my devices in EMP protected cases. So if everything does go down, I have some devices that would still be able to access satellites. And that's one of the things that Blockstream does, is if I still want to send Bitcoin anywhere in the world, if the internet's down, if my power grid is down, as long as I have a solar generator in my backyard for emergency purposes, I can charge, I live in Southern California, so we have lots of sunshine. I can charge my little device and send Bitcoin using the Blockstream satellites. Whether it's World War III or whether it's all sunshine and rainbows, there's really not a limitations to how I can send Bitcoin. So somebody like that's continuing to push the technological envelope for Bitcoin, I like to think that it's somebody like that. Adam Back created Hashcash, or proof of work. If somebody's if anybody's familiar with Bitcoin mining, there's this algorithm called proof of work. Adam Back created proof of work back in the 1990s, I believe. And Satoshi Nakamoto in the white paper actually quotes or cites Adam Back. So one way or another, Adam Back actually did help create Bitcoin. Whether he's Satoshi Nakamoto, we don't know.
Okay. Very interesting. So you want to talk about fractional reserve banking? You want to give that before we move into the Bitcoin?
Yeah, I'm actually so I know this is your show and I don't really get to ask the question,
Your
but
show
I'm
is not.
genuinely curious from somebody from somebody in your seat with what you do. Would you say that most of your customers, your clients, that your target market, do they know what fractional reserve banking is? Do you guys spend time discussing fractional reserve banking with them? I'm always curious about that.
Whenever we can get a client set down to focus on the health of their financial future and their estate, we don't have enough time in that 2-hour period to talk about fractional reserve banking. the only time they would get something like that would be through a presentation like this, and they would see the headline and probably not push the button and listen. So, go for it.
Okay. Well, in a nutshell, if you put $10 into your savings account, the bank legally is allowed to lend out $8 of that $10 that you deposited. Now, there's certain regulations that will allow them in certain cases to lend out up to 100% of your $10 deposit. Now, until the system breaks, everybody thinks the system's great, right? Banks are able to lend out that money. They make profit off of that. They charge the person that they're lending to, they charge them 9%, 12% interest on that loan. And then that's how they generate the interest for your savings account. So when you're getting 0.01 savings or interest on your savings account, you're getting the raw end of the deal, because they're making 15% on the loan. You're making 0.01 interest on it. Maybe you're in one of those high yield savings accounts that people do now, because interest rates are high. Maybe you're getting 4% on your savings account or something like that. You're still getting the small share of what they're doing with your money. They're lending out your money. So the default risk is stated to be on the bank's side of things, right? If whoever they lend money to defaults on the loan, the bank says that they're gonna eat that loss. But what are they eating that loss with? They're eating that loss with depositors' funds. They don't have their own money. I mean, they do, but the vast majority of their funds are depositor funds from you and I. And so I think that a lot of people, they hear about Bitcoin and they're like, oh, I don't know if I trust that, because that sounds a little sketchy. It's this magic internet money, and I don't know if I can trust it. On the other side of being a Bitcoiner and understanding how Bitcoin works, I look back at the fiat banking system and the fractional reserve banking system, and I think that system sounds so sketchy. How could that ever work? How could people ever trust in that? In the United States, it's worked until now. But in lots of countries around the world who have fractional reserve banking, the depositors get absolutely crushed when the inevitable bank failures happen. We saw this year in March, there was bank failures. The government had to step in. Those were some pretty large banks, but it wasn't all of the banks. If there was a higher, if there were more banks that had collapsed in March, the government only has so much capacity to deal with those things. At a certain point, the failure is going to fall back on the depositors, and again, that's you and I. So if you're happy with $8 of your $10 actually not being in your bank account and them just showing you an illustration. I mean, when you log into your bank account and you say, oh, I have $5,000 in my bank account, you actually don't. They're just putting that number on a screen. It's not sitting in a vault somewhere. It's sitting in their ledger being lent out to other people. That's capitalism at work. I don't knock them for that, but they've been able to lobby Congress, and they've been able to lobby the laws into such a degree of which they're probably using your funds to an extent in which if you knew how it worked, you probably wouldn't be comfortable with it.
So let's talk about Bitcoin and what's coming. Whenever I listen to somebody read something from the Fed or academia, a professor at a college in Boston, they like to talk about adaption, giving the public time to adapt, and I always sit there and think, adapt to less money and more stress, and do you see a great reckoning ahead, or do you just see a slow, how do you boil a frog type of, I'm gonna throw something out. I don't know what it's like in Riverside right now, but in our community, for most of the time that I've been here, I'm a couple hundred miles from where I grew up, a town called Salina, Kansas. I believe we're 50,000 people, even though you might look that up and see that we're 40 or whatever, but 50,000 people. For my entire 30-year existence in this community, we've always had a homeless man around, and everybody in town knew his name. Okay, and when we drive around downtown Salina, I don't drive around and count, but in this community of 50,000 people, I can't tell you today whether there's 30 homeless or 50 walking around, but there's a lot more than one. And go to a community of 500,000 area, Wichita, Kansas, just seems like there's people sleeping all over. So I Google it one day, and prior to COVID, again, I'd have to dig a lot more to trust any sources, but this country was growing at 35,000 new homeless a year prior to COVID, and now close to 500,000. Well, people have fired back at that and told me that's immigration. Well, these homeless here don't look like they're immigrants, but I can see the point when you go to South Texas and New York. There's definitely people there that you could tell are immigrants being let through the border, but that number is, in my opinion, the rich just got richer and the poor just got poorer in a significant way. Through
Yeah, I think that's what Christians, if Christians understood that this is the product of the system that we are in. This was the inevitable outcome of our system. We like to say, oh, look at, if you go back to the 1950s, the 1960s, when communism in the Soviet Union looked like it was working. It looked like it was working in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Nobody looking at the Soviet Union and their GDP and their economic output and all these things would have said that this system's inevitably going to crash, unless you understood the fundamentals of economics, that system was unsustainable. Just like you go to today and you go to the last 20 years or the last 100 years in the United States, this system looks like it's working. It looks like it's working until it's not. Like you said, you can go down the street and now it's harder to find people that own a home legitimately. Like young people, it's very hard for them to own a home because home affordability is very difficult, and homelessness is much easier. I mean, drugs are rampant. Depression, hopelessness, those things are rampant. That's been the product of our society.
Seminar I did back in 2009 or 10. If you take a convenience store clerk in 1970 that made $3 an hour, and you adjusted that for inflation, when we did this seminar back in 2008, I think the number was $30. What would that be now? How many convenience store clerks are making $45 an hour? And I think what happens to the haves of this country versus the have-nots, hey, in 1980, when I was 10 years old, if you told me that I was going to have 200,000 in my name, I would have thought, holy cow, I'm set for life. Okay, 30 years ago, we'd run retirement scenarios. People would tell me they need between $1,500 and $3,000 a month to live. Okay, back in 1992 when I got into this business. What are those numbers now? $10,000 a month. What do we strive to save for retirement? More than $1 million. Okay, and but I think we've almost been brainwashed into feeling grateful, feeling thankful for what we have. And actually, when you look around, are all your kids and grandkids clients? Are your neighbors? Are your friends? How many of them are, essentially in poverty or close to it? Does everybody you know not have an opportunity for, a semi-comfortable life and a somewhat of an opportunity? And I can see where this, even though the economy looks like it's working, it's not. So 21 million Bitcoin, remind our audience, you've now heard that 75 times, I hope, and over 19 million of them mined. I like to say over 19 million transactions have been solved. I'd rather put it that way. I'd rather call it harvesting than mining. But anyway, with today's computing power, it will take nearly 120 years to mine those last couple million Bitcoin that exist. And here I think the date's supposed to be April 24th of next year, but in 2024 the block is built, the supply gets cut in half, takes twice the money and twice the time to solve a transaction or mine a Bitcoin transaction. And so you call them sats, short for Satoshis, subdividing or not? Isn't that where the term SAT comes from? Is that not
Yep,
Satoshi?
absolutely.
Okay. Uh, this system may get implemented faster. And by the way, when you talked about people's skepticism, you compared that to believing in a higher being and believing that Christ is the Messiah. That skepticism, you know, I remind a lot of people it's fascinating to read some of the technology that's been rejected in our history. Okay. uh, a way for the government to spy on you. It's something that was real evil at one time before the world was educated and all of the technology was harnessed and the infrastructure was built. This country at one time was scared to death of something called electricity or that tricity stuff. That
It's that magic stuff.
yeah, I hear stories from older clients talking about their grandparents and great grandparents in that transition, and at least our clients come in today and they say Bitcoin and not Bitcom. Remembering it, understanding what it is, and the pronunciation of it. It's coming. It's coming whether you like it or not, people. Something has to come and solve the current really crisis we're in that we don't know we're in. The fiat crisis.
Yeah, I mean, ain't that the truth? And it would be short-sighted, and I think there was people maybe 15, 20 years ago that were like, not everything's going to go digital. It's pretty hard to argue nowadays that not everything's going digital. We see digital forms of everything. We see digital forms of music, of information, of all sorts of things. Things have been digitized across the board. There's almost nothing that exists purely analog anymore. There's always a digital representation of it. But that's kind of what makes Bitcoin such a revolutionary technology. And this is the point that orange pilled me, which orange pill means, that was the time that I kind of had this light bulb moment with Bitcoin. I heard this guy, Andreas Antonopoulos, talking about it, and this is 10 years ago or so. And he said that everything is going digital, but what makes Bitcoin such a profound invention is that it marks the first time that we were able to make something digital scarce. And that is a absolutely important quality that you have to have in order if money was going to go digital. Now, we have digital banking, we have digital ledgers, but all those are just record-keeping systems. What marks Bitcoin as unique is that it's an asset. It's a finite asset that is scarce, and it's not just a record. It's a thing. And so we were able to cap digital things for the first time ever with this thing called blockchain technology. That's the big problem that Bitcoin solved is making that scarce. And so if you didn't have that invention, you couldn't have fundamentally allowed money to be scarce. It would have always existed only in this physical form. It would have been the last holdout of analog technology. You would have always had to have physical currency or physical money like gold and silver. The example that Andreas Antonopoulos used was, he said, look at the music industry. When music went from being physical, records, CDs, cassettes, to digital, MP3 files, as soon as music went digital, you had things like Napster and LimeWire and music pirating, and that absolutely destroyed the economic models, the value that music had. All of a sudden, these multi-millionaire musicians were losing all of their income because people could steal their music because this thing that was once physical now had a digital form, and you could copy and replicate digital files endlessly. And so the fact that it was infinite, you could have as many of them as you wanted, it robbed all economic value from them. So you could not have money that could be copied and pasted. Imagine if money was digital and you and I could copy and paste money endlessly. That system is obviously unsustainable. Like, you can have the Federal Reserve can copy and paste money as much as they want. But if every citizen had the ability to copy and paste money and make their bank account whenever they wanted, that was an unsustainable system. So Bitcoin marked the first time that those digital things could be capped, could be accounted for in a fair and balanced way.
Yeah, I don't mean to make it's almost a Yogi Berra of me to repeat this, but just think about it, people. My parents, I don't think they passed any to me. We've long thrown away all of the 8 tracks, long thrown away all of the cassette tapes. I have a beautiful record collection, and I'm so proud of it. And I'll put a record on once in a while, and just love that recording more so than anything put on 8-track or cassette tape. But yeah, I end up not hassling with it, put it back, and the same music I want to listen to on that record, I have my Apple Music app, and just as clear and crisp. So my actual record player is, I just have it play. It's, have it play from my Apple iPhone. That being said, it's going to be an efficiency, a convenience thing. It's it's coming. It's coming. So
Yeah.
just like that, might cut.
Yeah. Well, and even for the economic rails of society, have you ever sent a lightning payment before? I know a lot of Bitcoiners that haven't sent a lightning payment before. It's kind of a newer version of technology.
Lightning Network.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
What's that?
And the Lightning Network, I've read about it, and you hear the gentleman that runs it interviewed on just on Squawk Box the other day. But yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Would you want to do a demonstration of it real quick? I can show you in about a minute how a Lightning transaction works. Would you want to try it? Okay. So while I'll talk for a second, but if you have your phone with you, are you able to download an app? It's not going to ask for any information or anything like that.
What app?
It's called Wallet of Satoshi, and it has a little yellow lightning bolt in it. Wallet of Satoshi. We'll see if this works. This will be interesting to do it through the through the video screen. Sorry to your editor is going to have to edit out some dead air. But while you're doing that, let me say something. The economic rails of society are going to benefit massively from this.
Okay,
so,
what was it called? One more time.
Wallet of Satoshi.
Got it. Comes up right away when I finally find the app.
So for merchant services, I don't know if most people understand how merchant services work.
Yeah,
like
crypto.com won the app.
So not crypto.com. So it should be
there.
it should be like the yellow lightning
Okay.
bolt.
Yep.
Black and yellow. Cool. And then just upload that and just, whatever, X out of the disclaimers. But
okay, who's behind this
businesses like
technology? Wallet of Satoshi. Do you own that?
what I don't make this technology,
Okay.
no. This is cool. You can use any Lightning app to access the Bitcoin. It's not like this is the only app that does this, but this is going to be huge for businesses going forward, because when my business accepts a payment, I don't get that money for 48 hours. And people think that because they swipe their credit card and it says approved right away, that the business is getting that money. They're not. They're getting an approval that says your bank has the money to pay, but I don't get that money as a business for 48 to 96 hours. And so the economic wheels of society are actually very slow. We have old systems in place so as a business, I have to pay for labor, products, supplies, all the things the costs that go into servicing my clients. I have to pay those up front. I get paid by the client, and then I have to wait, 96 hours in order to get paid. Now, that's a kind of slow system. There's extra capital. I have to keep more money in my business account just to cash flow this process of slow, antiquated merchant services. So now what we'll do is, and by the way, that costs money. I have 3 locations for my wellness business. Our merchant fees are about $50,000 per year based on the volume we do. We pay $50,000 a year just to Visa and MasterCard just for the right to accept credit cards. That's a pretty massive cost for a business that's my size. Now, if we can go to Bitcoin payments, I'll show you right here. So what I want you to do is hit the receive button on there.
First, it says the app needs to access the camera to scan QR codes.
Oh yeah, that should be okay. Yeah. Oh well, you know what? You're not gonna scan anything, so you can probably X out of that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, when you have a chance, just hit the receive.
Let me go back out of that. Okay. Okay. What did I do wrong?
This is a major moment. This is going to be your first Lightning transaction ever. This seems like a benign thing. This is a big deal right now. So we're stepping into the future.
Okay. So hit the receive button.
Yeah, so the receive button right there on the
Okay.
left,
Now I get a QR
and then
code.
it should pop up a QR code. So go ahead and hold that up to the screen. I'm gonna try and scan it
Hold it
here.
up to what screen?
To my like to the camera. I'm sorry, so I can see the QR
Okay.
code. I'm gonna try to get it real close. Let me see if I can. It's a little bright. Dang it.
Let me see if I
Uh,
can. Right.
can you go like right up to the camera? Man, I just might have ruined your show.
No,
Sorry.
that's right. It is.
Oh, here we go. I think this. Okay, okay, it worked. So it caught your thing. I'm gonna send you 50,000. You don't have. Yeah, that you're good to go. I'm gonna send you 50,000 satoshis. Okay, it's about $17. Okay, not a huge amount of money, but watch this. If you could hold, actually, just so they can see, hold your screen up to there so we can see how fast this payment works. Okay, I'm gonna hit send.
Okay.
Boom, comes through, and you got payment. That's how fast. I just sent money using mathematics. We didn't ask permission from a merchant service. We didn't ask permission from a third party. I just sent you $17 worth of Bitcoin through the internet without permission from anybody. It was just like me handing you cash through the screen. There's no technological way to do that without Bitcoin. If I were to send you a Venmo payment or anything like that, there's 5 parties involved in a Venmo payment. It's your bank, my bank, you, me, and then the payment rail. We just use mathematics to send value from person to person. And you know how much that cost? It cost 0 satoshis. It costs 0 cents to do that
Of course,
transaction.
it says, 50,000 sats, and there's nothing
Yep.
else I need to do.
Yeah, that's it. So now you have 50,000 sats. You can give them out to your employees or whatever you want to do with that.
Gotcha.
But that's it. That's a lightning payment, and you think about what that can do for commerce in terms of how fast it could speed up the wheels of society. Being able to send, I could have sent you. It's almost would have been kind of a fun experiment. I could have sent you a quarter of a penny's worth of Bitcoin just to show how little of value I can send. You can send a payment, big or small, across the Bitcoin Lightning Network. For anybody that doesn't know, Venmo or Zelle, the smallest amount you can send on there is 26 cents. You can, like I said, you can send a fraction of a penny through Bitcoin because it's permissionless. You don't need to ask anybody for permission.
Kind of maybe validated that the public is going to benefit tremendously when Bitcoin's $1 million or 50 million a transaction, whether you own one now or not, right? Kind of.
Yeah.
People say, well, Bitcoin's not backed by everything. Well, actually, is kind of backed by everything. In a barter system. That's for another time. But that is so interesting, and I am flattered because we've never paid somebody to do a podcast, but this is the first time somebody's paid me to be on. So I will.
I mean, I'm just really trying to get invited back next time. So should I have sent more? Should I have sent 100,000 sats? I don't know what I need to do, but if I get the invite back, then I'll know that it worked.
This is pretty unbelievable. Pretty unbelievable. Well, you said you had about an hour, and it's been an hour and 9 minutes, and I am humble and grateful, and thank you so much for spending this time. And I'm gonna stop recording and then ask you about 5 more questions. But so thank you, Brian. Brian DeMint, and so everybody needs to send in some sats to. Where's the best? Go to Amazon and order this right now.
Yeah, Amazon's a really easy way to get it. I think it's on sale there right now. I think it's something like 40% off. So anyways, yeah, if you want to pick it up, it's an easy read, right? I mean, I think it's easy enough. It's accessible for anybody, whether you have some experience with Bitcoin or whether you're completely
Didn't even get into this much. Really didn't need to, because everything you've said this evening and a whole bunch more is in here. But I actually, once I got a hold of you, I ordered it on Audible and listened to it a couple times. Get on the treadmill at 4 a.m. and start listening, and then rewind and go back, and actually bought a copy of it so A, I could visibly show it, but B, I've got one at home that's all highlighted. And I actually we've done 4 podcasts recently, and I actually sent a copy of this to the CEO of Sphere 3, so kind
wow.
of started making this
Thank you.
my gift, and thank you for whatever somebody has done.
I appreciate that.
Anyway,
Thank you.
thank you very much. I'm going to stop recording, and good night, everybody.